Hi, I'm Jimmy Aluria here at 3 Automotive and Diesel Repair. We get a lot of questions about different battery issues on a vehicle. So today I'm going to answer some of the most common questions to help you better understand what's going on with the battery in your car so you can see the warning signs before you're left stranded and know when you should get it checked out. What are the most common signs that my car battery is failing? The first sign of a battery that's starting to fail is you're going to start seeing a slow or sluggish engine crank. So it's the engine kind of sounds like it's turning over slower than it normally should. And that's your first signs. Usually before a battery goes out completely, you're going to notice it being a little bit slow to start. Another thing is that when you actually hear some sort of a clicking sound, if you hear a clicking sound, that's usually a sign that the battery is too low to actually even turn the car over. So you're going to have to either have it recharged or most likely replaced. One of the other signs that the battery is losing power is that you'll have dim lights inside the car, or sometimes even the headlights are a little lower than they normally are. It can be a sign that the battery's struggling along. Why does my car struggle to start in colder morning temperatures? Sometimes cold weather can weaken the battery a little bit, but typically older batteries are the ones that will really struggle in the colder weather. So when it gets really cold out and you feel like your car's being slow to start, it's probably a good sign to actually get it checked out to see if it has enough power to actually start the car when it's cold. A lot of times in Phoenix, we don't really see that too much unless it gets really cold in the wintertime. But if you're traveling up north into the mountains in the wintertime, definitely want to make sure you have your battery checked before you go, because in the cold weather, you're going to need more cranking power to start the engine. Now, one of the things that may make you think that you have a low battery, but actually it's not anything to do with the battery, is that when you're in cold weather, sometimes the oil in the engine can be a little thicker. That's extremely cold. A lot of the modern oils aren't affected too much by the type of temperatures we have here in Arizona. But sometimes if the engine oil is very, very cold, it'll be very, very slow to crank, and it has nothing to do with the power of the battery. It's just that things are really cold. How can I tell if I need a new battery or just a recharge? If you have recharged the battery at home or somebody's recharged it for you and it keeps dying, there's a very good chance that one of two things is going on. Either the battery just needs to be replaced because it's not holding a charge, or you've got something that's consistently drawing the energy down even when the car is shut off. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you have a dome light or something that's inside the car that's still on, sometimes some of the outlets, like a battery, has constant power going to phone rechargers or anything like that. Sometimes in the older cars, the cigarette lighter has constant power and there's something plugged into that. You've charged the battery and you come back and it's still discharging the battery before you go to start it up again. Something's pulling a charge from that, and it could be a light being left on or something that's plugged into the car that you've forgotten about that's drawing the energy from the battery. Now, the way to test that out is there's a draw test that a professional mechanic can do to make sure that there's not too much energy being drawn from the battery when the car's just sitting there without any power on. The only way to really test that is through the proper testing equipment. What causes a battery to die suddenly overnight? Usually when a battery dies suddenly overnight, the most common thing is that something in the car's left on. It could be that there was a light left on inside the car, or it could be a trunk light or a hood light. So if the hood was left open and there's a light underneath the hood, that can draw too much energy out of the battery and it's dead when you go to start it the next morning. Or if you've left your trunk on overnight, remember there's a battery inside most trunks, so that battery is on if the trunk lid is open, and that's drawing the energy out of your battery. The other sign is just the battery's literally its last life, and there's a bad cell inside of that battery, and it's time to replace the battery. Why does my car click but not start? Well, the first thing that you want to check when you go out, if the car was running fine, it was starting fine before, and it's clicking but not starting, that can be just a bad connection at the battery. And this is very common. Sometimes they kind of wiggle loose and you need to get that tightened up, or you've just got a bad connection and it needs a new clamp on there. But a bad connection will cause that. A weak or dead battery will also cause the car to click. It won't turn over, it just clicks, and it makes a very fast clicking sound. That can also be a dead battery. And the other sign is that you have something, not the battery, but you actually have a starter going bad. And sometimes the mechanics inside of the starter will make that noise when you have a bad starter. The energy is going to the starter, but it's not doing its job in turning the engine over to get the car to start. How long do car batteries typically last in Arizona's climate? Well, in Arizona, batteries don't last as long as in some more mild climates. The heat is very hard on a car's battery. So we typically see that they last between 2 and 3 years, 4 years if you're lucky and the car is garage kept, but typically you can expect maybe 2 to 3 years. Sometimes if we've had a really hot summer or you've been driving the car a lot in the extreme heat can shorten the life of the battery. And so if we've had a hot summer, that's going to be really hard on your car battery. And if you start hearing the signs of it, maybe a weak battery, you might want to get it checked out before it leaves you stranded. What drains a car battery when the vehicle is off? Well, when the vehicle is off and the key is out of the car, there should be very little energy being pulled out of the battery. But some things that can be left on are interior lights. Maybe you turned a light on, or maybe you pulled the sun visor down and that little lid that has a light on was left on. It could be something like the trunk or the hood was left open and there's a light on there. So those are the types of things that will drain a battery. Now there's other things that can cause that too. Now you could have a problem with the car's computer or some sort of a component that should be off that is actually becoming faulty and needs to be replaced, and it's actually left on. So those would be something that you'd want to have checked out by a professional mechanic. What should I do if my battery light turns on while driving? Well, if your battery light turns on while you're driving, it's telling you either the battery has a problem or the charging system has a problem. And it's very likely that you're going to be left stranded if you don't get it checked out right away. So this is your warning sign. Don't turn off the car. When that battery light comes on, your car is actually running. Do not shut the car off. Get it someplace where you can get it tested right away, because the car is telling you that there's going to be a problem. Eventually, you're not going to be able to drive the car, or it's not going to start because you got a problem going on. How do I know if corrosion on the battery terminals is causing problems? If you have corrosion on your battery terminals, it's a good idea to get it cleaned up. That corrosion eventually will start rotting away, and it'll lessen the connection of the battery terminals on the actual cables. And eventually what's going to happen is it's going to be hard to start, slow to start, or you may have other electrical issues because these cars they have so many computers, they need a lot of energy. And if we have corrosion on those cables, you may not be getting enough energy to the car for it to function properly. So when you have corrosion on the battery cables, get that cleaned up. There's usually a very inexpensive service that you can do. They take the cables off, they clean it up, and then they tighten those cables up and spray a non-corrosive material on top of that. Can short trips or infrequent driving damage my car battery? Damage? Maybe not. But if you don't drive very often, or you take a lot of short trips, that can be really hard on a battery. On short trips, a lot of times what happens is the battery doesn't get fully recharged. So it loses charge when it's started, it's lost a little charge as it's sitting, and maybe you just go down a mile to the grocery store and back, and then it sits for another week or two. That's a situation where you're pulling more energy from the battery that's being replaced because it's not driving enough. So short trips can cause that. The other thing is that if a battery is sitting too long, meaning that the car isn't driven, maybe it's a third or fourth car in the garage, maybe it's a classic car that you just drive maybe once a month out to get coffee or something. Well, all batteries are going to be pulling, there's always energy being pulled from that battery even when it's sitting. So there's a way that you can actually fix that by either unplugging the battery completely, or you can put what they call a little trickle charger on there. It's called a battery saver, and what it'll do is it'll keep a little bit of energy going in that battery, so that if that car's sitting there for several months, you go out there and you start it because it's got full charge. Why does jump starting work sometimes but not always? Typically when a jump start doesn't work, it's because the battery in the car that's trying to be jumped is just too low, and the battery on the car that has a good battery doesn't have enough power to power both cars. So if your battery's completely failed and you're trying to get a jump start, a lot of times that will not work. And quite honestly, it puts a lot of stress on the car that's trying to help you out because it's pulling so much energy from that one battery. Another thing can be that you actually have loose or corroded connections on the battery. So maybe it's drained, but there's still a bad connection on your battery, and you go to jumpstart and you don't get any action. So you need to make sure that you have tight cables and that there's no corrosion on the cables before you start to try and jumpstart. Now, sometimes when you go to jumpstart and you're not getting your car to turn over at all, you may not be dealing with a battery issue. A jump start is good for if you have something that needs a little bit of help to boost it, just so it can get started and you can get someplace where you can get the battery checked or the charging system checked out and fixed. But if you have a starting problem with your vehicle, like the starters going out, a jump start's not going to do you any good. What maintenance steps help prevent battery failure in winter? The maintenance that you can do to prevent a battery failure in the winter months or in the summer months is to have your battery regularly checked. Here at 3A Automotive, during an oil change or any service, we hook up our battery tester to make sure that you have enough power in that battery and it's not showing any signs of failure. So that's one thing, is have it regularly checked a couple times a year. The other thing is that make sure that the terminals are both clean and tight. So the clamps on the battery, make sure that there's no corrosion there and that those clamps are actually clamped down nice and tight. Batteries are usually about $200 to replace. That's with labor. And a good battery will have a good 30-month warranty. So it's something that you want to do to make sure you always have a good battery in the car. So when there's a sign that it's getting weak, or you're warned by your mechanic because they tested it and it's getting weak, just go ahead and change that out, because you never know when they're going to fail. They will fail overnight. Sometimes there's not much warning. So when you get a sign that the battery is going to fail, go ahead and replace it. I hope this video helped answer some of your biggest questions about battery issues and charging issues with your vehicle. If you'd like to schedule a battery test or have us look at your charging system on your car, stop by the shop, or you can give us a call here at 602-997-7978. We're here to keep your vehicles reliable, safe, and valuable, and make sure you have no problems in the future.